Why do people have to suffer? Have you ever wondered about this question? If yes, do you think that there is a legal way of solving this issue? I'm sure that all of you have ever heard about euthanasia, which is a method of finishing a life purposefully to relieve pain and misery. I believe that each of you have definite position regarding this phenomenon. So, do you think that euthanasia should be legalized? To be honest, I was pretty surprised when I found out about what kind of opinions and positions do people have relating to the euthanasia. Hence, there are several advantages and the disadvantages of legalizing euthanasia that were identified by the humanity. Accuracy builds credibility by John Ron. We all know that without facts and pieces of evidence, there is no credibility. So, according to researching works and studies of the National Center for Biotechnology Information and the BBC, there are more positive sides of euthanasia than cons that stand for its legalizing. Consequently, I have done several researching works based on above stated credible sources containing statistics, facts, and the specific studies of scientists regarding advantages of euthanasia and its positive consequences on the society. By analyzing all the data, all provided data, and taking into account my personal worldviews and life experience, I have defined three main advantages of euthanasia that demonstrate and explain why should the euthanasia be legalized. Therefore, I'd like to present them to you today. Those three advantages will serve for me as main arguments and play a significant role in reaching my main goal, which is to convince all of you why all should people accept euthanasia and why it should be legal. So these are: it will put end to our sufferings of people. It will allow people to die with dignity. It eliminates the fear of the financial burden. In the following speech, I'm going to demonstrate to you strong arguments based on evidence, statistics, and facts to support my point of view. First of all, I'm going to explain what is the importance of euthanasia in the lives of suffering people. First of all, as I said before this time, it will put end to sufferings of many people, patients who suffer from severe pain. Even strong pain relievers only work for a short time and to prevent you from leading a normal life. For example, when I studied various surveys conducted in countries where euthanasia is legalized, I found out that the majority of respondents who suffer from various diseases prefer to die than live in agony for the rest of their lives. Helping someone to improve their situation is always morally acceptable. For example, if killing will improve someone's situation and the person himself wants to be killed, how can such killing be considered causing harm that this person doesn't deserve? How can this act be considered unjust? How could it possibly be wrong? And what then is voluntary euthanasia if not this? It's also important to support the patient's right to personal and physical independence by allowing them to die without humiliation. If a person suffers from an incurable disease and doesn't want to live anymore, doctors have no right to prevent him. There may be situations associated with an incurable disease and excruciating suffering that life loses its value for the patient. The quality of life decreases to a critical level, after which comes the desire to die. Accordingly, medicine, one of the main goals of which is to ensure the patient's quality of life, is powerless and hasn't the right to allow euthanasia in such a situation. In such extraordinary circumstances, euthanasia is viewed not as a cruelty or crime, but rather as compassion. Secondly, it will allow people to die with dignity. Patients degrading. For example, patients in the final phase of the fatal disease frequently finish up housebound and dependent on nurses and the family for basic tasks that can be degrading, such as eating, bathing, and going to the toilet. There is no there is one more example: a woman suffering from terminal multiple sclerosis that had left her unable to take care of herself told the Daily Telegraph back in 2008 that such life is just torture. Providing dying individuals the chance to choose how and when to die helps them to take charge of their lives and how their family members will remember them. The conditions of their deaths should also be allowed to be regulated by patients used to making their own healthcare decisions during life. For example, autonomy means to control over decisions about one's own. It implies a patient's defense, which surgical procedures to choose or forego in the healthcare environment. Patient autonomy provides as a rationalization for explicit consent. The patient can have the authority to make a choice about treatments or participation in medical research only after thorough explanation of risks and the benefits. Thirdly, it eliminates the fear of the financial burden. A person has the right to be altruistic. For example, they can feel sorry for their loved ones, not burden them either morally or materially. Such a measure frees the patient's family from the physical, emotional, and financial burden. Treating patients in a coma is quite expensive. By following to the New Zealand-based life information website, a survey in the United States of origin in which voluntary euthanasia is lawful demonstrates that 66% of euthanasia applications engaged patients who didn't want to be a financial burden. In most cases, patients never come to their senses, which makes the life of relatives only more difficult, giving false hope. For example, if the whole family spends all the money for the treatment and the maintenance of their relative, then there may be a case when their relative who feels guilty for this burden may fall into a deep depression, which in turn will make the patient's condition even worse. So in my introduction, I stated that each of you probably has a definite position regarding euthanasia. I have provided you with high quality information about several advantages of this phenomenon. Therefore, I think you will agree that all these advantages seem quite reasonable and understandable. In order to review, then, let me remind you of the three main advantages of euthanasia that demonstrates to us why this phenomenon should be legalized. So first of all, as I said before this time, it will put an end to sufferings of many people. Secondly, it will allow people to die with dignity. Thirdly, it eliminates the fear of the financial burden. So if you think carefully about all the important things that I mentioned about euthanasia, I promise you that you will be convinced that euthanasia is a freedom of choice and the main opportunity to get rid of all suffering for people to a painful death. Thank you for your attention.